next part of the story gets interesting. The disciples and some others were on their way to the great healing service or some type of revival service, and something unusual happened. Let's read about it. Matthew chapter 9, verses 20 and 22. Matthew chapter 9, verse 20 and 22. We just read from Matthew chapter 14. Here is where this story started 6 months earlier. This is why the people came and recognized Jesus. Matthew chapter 9, verses 20 through 22. Just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, "If only I touch his cloak, I will be healed." Jesus turned and saw her. "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has healed you." And the woman was healed from that moment. Now, if that's the only portion we read about this story, we miss some key pieces. So I want you just to listen as I read all the other passages connected to this, and I'll list them for you, and you might want to write them down, but just listen to the story in its full context and then go back and read it later. Luke chapter 8, verses 42 and 43. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. A woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. A new fact. These doctors hadn't been able to do anything for 12 years. I imagine her funds were a little bit low at this point after 12 years of care. Listen to Matthew chapter 14, verses 20 and 21, just a little different slant. Just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, "If only I touch his cloak, I will be healed." Luke says the crowds were so massive that they were almost crushing Jesus, crowding in, trying to get around him. Matthew basically says that a lady slipped up behind him. Now, she had to do some little bit of pushing and shoving, maybe, to get through the crowd. Many times when we envision this woman with an issue, we somehow in our mind think that she was all decrepit and bent down, just kind of walking through the crowd, and the only reason she touched the edge of his garment is because she had back problems. The scripture didn't say anything about her back. It said she had an issue of blood. So why is this woman moving through this crowded scene with all these men on their way to the Sunday Go to Meeting Camp Revival healing service? Why does she bust in and push her way through? Why doesn't she call his name out loud? Why is she only saying within herself? These are some things that we need to look at. Luke chapter 8, verses 44 through 46. She came up behind him, touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it. Okay, everybody's pressing in. All these men, they're with the big-time evangelists, and they're on their way to do God's work. And then, when Jesus says, "Who touched me?" "I don't know. Must have been someone else." Let's look at this woman's response. When they all denied it, Peter said, Peter's always the first one that's going to speak up, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, and I know that power has gone out of me." So basically, Peter is saying, Jesus, what's wrong with you? Yeah, someone touched you. Look at the crowd. Can't you see they're pressing in? We all know this. But Jesus says, no. This was a different touch. Someone touched the power in me, and the power in me was released. I'm not talking about those that are trying to meet the new rabbi. I'm not talking about those that are just here for the fish and bread. I'm not talking about those that just want to see what's going on with the crowd, what's all the excitement. Someone in this crowd touched me, and power has flown out of me. That's who I want to know. Luke 8:47 continues the story. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed. Now picture this. If she's touching the hem of his garment, which we need to see what that really is, she's down like this to touch that garment, and she's probably lower than everyone else. And Peter's going, hey, what's up, Jesus? What do you mean someone touched you? Can't you see everybody around? And then she kind of looks up and realizes there's no way out. Even though she said within herself, even though she pressed through this crowd of unruly men that were all excited to be with Jesus, she knows she's been caught. I don't think she was fearing Jesus' reaction, but the crowd. You see, if she had been bleeding for 12 years, the Hebrew scripture says that she's unclean. In fact, she's supposed to announce to you and I'm unclean. You need to keep your distance from me, because if you touch me, if you touch my clothes, if you even sit where I have been sitting, you are rendered unclean for a certain period of time, and you will not be allowed to participate in the temple. And it won't matter if you're a priest. It won't matter if you're the high priest. It won't matter if you're the common person. If you touch what I got, you're unclean, and it's going to break your connection with God. So this woman has lived with a social stigma, and she's breaking some social and religious taboos by even doing this, because basically that whole crowd, because they're all pressing in, she's rendered a bunch unclean. And you know how people get when they can't go to their Sunday go-to meeting. You're going to prevent me from going? I'm sure she would have caught a lot of unkind words. So she knows she's caught. I mean, it's kind of one of those moments where everybody is quiet. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Go on to Matthew chapter 14, verse 2, and we're going to look at Luke chapter 8, verse 48. Jesus turned and saw her and said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has healed you." Luke says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." We need to look at what's going on here in this passage. There is a foundation for this particular garment. And if you'll look at Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 through 41, Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 through 41, you will find out that the Hebrews were commanded to make this biblical garment, and on the corners to attach fringe, or tzitzit. And the tzitzit is basically what we were looking at earlier, the long fringe. It's knotted in a particular way, but the biblical version says there needs to be at least one blue cord or one blue string inside of it. Okay? And that identifies.